Hello and welcome to Quigley on Divorce, a behind-the-scenes look. I'm your host, James Quigley. Today I am joined by a very, very special guest, Hadley O'Regan. Hadley is a friend and coincidentally happened to have been a client of mine. So what's particularly amazing about having Hadley here today is it is very rare that our viewers and listeners actually have an opportunity to get a behind-the-scenes look from someone who's gone through the process. You know, I can give my behind the scenes perspective as a lawyer, but it's so much different, I think, from someone in your position who I think you would agree with me kind of went through a fairly difficult divorce.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, James. I greatly appreciate it. I feel very honored to be here. And also, I think it's very important for a woman who has gone through a contentious divorce to give her education and knowledge toward other people who are going through the same. So I'm very happy to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
So as a starting point, if you, and this goes back some years, I know, if you're speaking to, and again, it doesn't have to be to a woman necessarily, but if you're speaking to an individual who's just at a point in their marriage where it hasn't been going well, you know it hasn't been going well, you're thinking about it, what would you say to someone at those early stages in terms of the process and what, you know, things to consider before you even really take the plunge, so to speak?
Well, what happened to me was we were both in a very unhappy marriage, and I knew that things were not going well, and he obviously knew things weren't going well. But instead of me addressing the actual issue and really starting to plan for a possibility of divorce and to protect myself, I chose to just stick my head in the sand and kind of let it happen to me instead of actually, really taking the initiative, not to start the divorce, but just to, kind of gather my troops, my friends, my family, go to see lawyers and just kind of begin to dip my toe in the water. So that's what I should have done. And I didn't do that. And then all of a sudden he did all of his work, what he was supposed to do on his end, very, very, very well. And then I was just sort of clobbered with all kinds of legal stuff that I had no idea about. So I think what's very important is if you're in a situation that you know is not right for you, just begin to gather information, go see attorneys, and just begin to feel it out, because it's a process and you have to start to protect yourself in that process.
Interesting. So it sounds like, what I'm hearing in that is really being proactive.
Yes.
In just developing a support network, which includes obviously finding a skilled, knowledgeable divorce lawyer, getting the information that way, but also having a support system with friends, family, and sometimes even mental health professionals.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. A therapist is extremely important, especially in a very contentious divorce. My divorce, actually, I was driving over here today, and it's May, 13 years ago, my divorce started.
Wow.
And it just sort of was finally, all the nonsense was finally over just recently. So it's an emotional journey of mental, emotional, psychological, physical, everything.
Sure.
And then when you combine your children with that, it just makes the whole thing, more difficult. So therefore, preparing yourself through absolutely getting a therapist, and then, taking care of yourself, doing yoga, doing meditation. It's all a part of being able to go through a journey that will be difficult.
Challenging.
Yeah.
So tell me, you mentioned kids, and I know you have children, great,
Beautiful children.
Wonderful children. What I hear oftentimes as a divorce lawyer is, well, I stayed in the marriage longer for the kids, thinking that you're actually helping the kids. From the perspective of going into the process and your concerns about the kids, how did you manage that? How did you process the impact on the kids?
Well, I must be truthful and say I didn't process it very well. They were very, very young. William was 4 and my daughter was 6. So, and I think, again, had I prepared more myself, inwardly, and really had gotten my ducks in a row to go into this, then that would have then come down easier on the kids. But because I was so kind of chaotic and I didn't know what was going on, I was very overwhelmed and I was very afraid and very sad. A lot of that kind of just trickled down to how they were affected. So I think, again, had I been more proactive with my just mental health and emotional health, then that would have been better for them. So, but then, with the kids, it's a journey for them as well. And it's confusing and erratic and chaotic and oftentimes, sad. I mean, very, very sad for them too.
Yeah.
So it's, it's a very difficult thing to try to make sure everyone's okay.
Yeah.
But now they're great.
Sure.
So it was a journey. We had to, and I think, when they get a little older than 4 and 6, being very open with them about what's going on, never, discrediting your former spouse, try to be as supportive as you can, which is near next to impossible in situations, but it's very important because it's not just about you, me and him. It was about me and him and the children, because we were a family. So we have to remember that it's just, yes, you may despise him or hate her or whatever it is, but there are children, and that has to be, and it's really just, it's a separation of you two, not you two and the children.
So what's interesting to me, just even listening to you, is, and I think where I've had such an admiration for you as a mother and just as a person, so forth, is a lot of people come to me and it's all about the other person. He or she needs to do this, or he or she is that, and they're bad. A lot of what you're talking about is that critical sort of self-reflection, where it's, looking back, you were at a space where, you didn't have the support, you didn't have the information, how, again, getting yourself to the position so that you can manage yourself. It's almost like I use that analogy when you're flying and the oxygen masks comes down and they say, put your mask on first, right? You have to take it as a mom, as a wife, you have to take care of yourself, and then you can help your children going into that kind of a process.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not well, it's going to be hard to be supportive for the kids in that process.
Absolutely. And the difficult thing, and I can say all of this now in hindsight, but the difficult thing is when you get to that point in your marriage, you're already pretty devastated because it's not working. So there's so much that you have to, the mountain that you have to climb to get to a place where you can offer good energy. It's difficult. So I'm not saying that it's easy. It's just in hindsight, I wish I would have, instead of kind of, again, putting my head in the sand and not thinking about it. I just couldn't really think about it that much because it was so, depressing and sad and overwhelming. But I should have, because I did have the strength. I think that we as women tend to have things happen to us instead of taking control and making things happen, both for our, mental health and physical health. So, and our children.
Yeah.
So
it's really interesting. So you get out of the, like you said, I think the decision was sort of made for you, it was brought to you, and you're, all of a sudden you're in a position where you're reacting and you're responding. What was, again, looking back, the process, divorce is filed, you're sort of reeling, you can't even believe this is happening. What are some of the things that you weren't prepared for? What is about the process itself? What didn't you understand?
I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand anything from point A, really, truly.
And wait a minute, we should make a disclaimer. I was not your attorney at point A.
No, unfortunately. No, I had to go through 4 attorneys before I found my wonderful James. And part of that reason was because, and I think I can say this, my ex-husband, in preparing for his side of the divorce, he went to go see all the top lawyers in Chicago, like all the firms. And the only reason why he didn't choose my James is because he came to visit you at the office, and then for some reason he left. So the only reason I was allowed to even come see you was because he hadn't come to see you.
He hadn't interviewed with our firm.
Yeah.
Right.
But he didn't interview with you, right?
Yeah.
So that was, again, when I remember I called my sister, who was a tax and real estate attorney, and I said, Dusty, give me some attorneys. So I started calling all the top firms, and they wouldn't even talk to me because they're not allowed to. So he had essentially blocked me out of having good representation. Now, again, I'll segue, but he viewed the divorce as going to war, and he prepared and going to battle, and he prepared himself.
Yep.
And was that in good conscience? Maybe, probably not, but he did prepare himself, and I did not. So that, again, is something that is extremely important. When you know this is coming down the hill, you have to start protecting yourself. So anyway, so from the get-go, I had no idea. And then my attorneys, I don't know. So, but then eventually I found my way to Mr. James Quigley, and things, of course, became much more clear. I think I was just, because my situation was we had that period where there was nothing going on for a year because we had that other thing in the court. So it was a lot of confusion. And I think that attorneys who do divorce every single day, who deal with this every single day, just kind of presume that you understand a few key things. But actually, I have to say that I didn't understand anything.
Yeah.
So again, you need to go online and read about divorce, but most essentially you need to get a wonderful, wonderful attorney, and you can do that by go and see, and visit, and bring a friend with you so you can document your visits, and interview people and find out who you're most comfortable with.
So it's interesting because, and again, I'm not preaching any privileges here, but you will recall you and I had many meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them weren't as friendly and happy as this is today, but that was part of that difficult process where I had to stay objective. I cared about you, wanted to fight for you, but I had to give you straight talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to hear sometimes when you're in that situation. But then you also needed from me answers. You needed clarity. You needed explanation. You needed a strategy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also I think and we came to heads a few times, but we needed to.
Yeah.
We needed to. And through that, we developed a relationship. And I think, a lot of the times when you were saying, A plus B equals C, and it just in kind of my reality, I'm like, what are you talking about? And most importantly, why is this taking so long? And just the judicial process and the divorce process takes, and especially when unfortunately when it's contentious, it takes forever.
Yeah.
And just getting in front of the judge will take 6 months, and then having something processed will take another 6 months. So I think that none of us, going into that, I never thought I would just be finishing this after 13 years.
Yeah.
So, and just the time of it it's frustrating. And also it wears you down, because every day we had a period through my divorce where they were asking me, well, what do you do for work? And I truly felt that my divorce was work, because it was work. It was every day of, not every day of talking with you, but when it was all that craziness was going on, we were, emailing and a lot. And it was a daily experience.
Yeah.
So,
what was interesting, what you said too, is you mentioned how your ex-husband approached this as though he was going to war.
Yes.
So what was unfortunate for you is you were not afforded the luxury of preparation. You were not afforded the luxury of alternative dispute resolution. In other words, he didn't approach this saying, listen, it didn't work out, let's get a mediator. Let's do it collaboratively. It was, the bomb was launched before you even had a chance to get into the bunker.
Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. You try not to get too political.
Sorry.
But understanding the analogy, I could understand how, for you and many listeners or viewers, not seeing it coming is when you're just reeling to sort of get back on your feet, let alone get the right army behind you, and then really sort of be able to assert your strategy. Very difficult when you're responding.
Yeah, when you're reacting.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's another very important point. I think it's, again, when you react to something, you're not fully, your brain isn't, you're just acting, reacting. You're not thinking and processing. Whereas if I had done my due diligence, because I did not know this is not coming. Right. Yeah, I did know. I had a distinct feeling, but I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to take charge of my own life, because he had kind of handled everything for me. And I truly thought at the very beginning, and many spouses will say this, that they never think that it'll get that terrible. Yeah. Like he won't do that, or he won't do this, or she won't do this, or she won't do that. But actually they will. Or maybe they won't, but but you need to prepare for them too. And that's a very hard concept to believe that your husband, who you both loved each other,
have kids with,
and had a family with, would then act like that. But oftentimes men do, because they do view it as war. And unfortunately women, or a chess game, or however you want to say it, but unfortunately women don't. because it's a very emotional process for us to go through a divorce and to have the divorce begin and then to have the threat of your children being taken away. And it's just, so instead of thinking of it very succinctly, at least I was very overly emotional overload. So I couldn't really process it clearly.
That's interesting because, you know, at the risk of sounding sexist, I've had in my 27 years of practice, just my own observations where exactly what you say in many cases, and again, these are not sweeping generalizations, but oftentimes, especially in a situation where if you have a man who's a business owner, if he's a businessman, if he's, you know, calculated, there is more of that warlike, methodical, you know, business-like at times approach, whereas oftentimes, especially a woman, you're home with the children, raising the children, you know, there's a nurturing and sort of an emotional side to that sometimes you do see men and women approach the same process in very different ways.
Yeah. Mars and Venus and all that.
There's a lot of books written about it by people smarter than me.
Yes, but I do think, and it is very much of, unfortunately, a game. And I think maybe if people going through this process, if we view it like, I mean, but it's not a game because it's your life and it's your former spouse and of course your children. But if you can sort of take an emotional step back from it and view it as, okay, this is what needs to get done and I need to protect myself in this way and I need to make sure my children are okay. Therefore, I need to be okay. So what can so A, B, C, D, what can I do? Write it out, write a list. You know, and make sure that, you know, you're on top of it, which I know is vastly impossible. But
so one of the things you mentioned like a game, but then you also mentioned chess. And so for me, that's really a very good analogy in terms of how I try to approach it. And what's sometimes gets young, and you and I can relate personally to this, because in chess, you really, it's less about emotion. And it is about the next, not even the next move you're going to make, but the next 4 or 5 moves down the road. And so one of the things we always try to do is figure out where you're going, where do you want to get to, and then try to reverse engineer with those proper steps. Now, that's very methodical, it's very logical, very objective. If you're scared, if you're broke and worried about money and worried about your kids and all that stuff, you know, you're not sitting here saying, where am I moving my rook or my pawn, or, you know, those kinds of things. And so sometimes those are concepts that are hard to blend together, that very methodical, hey, we have to get to an objective place, but still be caring and compassion and understanding the emotional side of what you're trying to process through that chess game, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. But it is important, and I wish I wish I would have somehow managed my emotion about it, because I think a lot of the chaos that, and actually within the divorce, I have to be very, very honest and say a lot of things that happened were of my own doing, and I was so so upset and so depressed and so overwhelmed and so emotional about so many things within the divorce that I was kind of, what's the word I'm trying to look? Oh, self-sabotaging myself. You know, I was doing things to numb the pain, instead of doing things to promote a lack of pain. You know, I could have protected myself in many, many ways that would have been much healthier than I did. So that was a huge lesson for me too.
Yeah.
You know, you have to.
And that's where, to me, it's interesting. You started this by talking about getting mental health professionals involved in your camp. And that's where I see too, you know, especially if you come from a relationship where your self-esteem might have been diminished, your confidence is diminished, you haven't been in the professional world, you know, so you take all those things and then wrap those around all of the fear you have, the uncertainty, the unknown that's ahead of you. Very, very daunting. If you don't have somebody or something to help you through that process, you know, you can succumb to like you said, things that will numb the pain, or it makes it, I just want it to go away today.
Yeah,
I just want to feel better.
I don't want to feel anything anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
so,
yeah.
but the part of divorce is it is a loss. It's a huge loss. And so you have those 9 stages of loss by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And you have to go through them, and you can get very, very stuck if you choose to just get stuck. So, again, easier said than done. I think with a therapist, it's extremely important as well, because within this process, especially if it's a long, drawn-out divorce, your family is going to get sick of hearing about it. Your friends will get sick of hearing about it, and they're going through it.
Your divorce lawyer might get sick of it.
Your divorce lawyer might get. You did?
No, not at all.
No. So it's very important to have outside resources and a person who has to listen to you, and who will then give you very objective advice as opposed to emotional advice that will come from your friends and your family. And also, I think it's important to have a break from the divorce and not talk about it with your friends and family all the time, because then you can remove yourself from it. Yeah. And also, go to yoga or go do whatever exercise works for you, but definitely exercise, because you have to keep your brain sharp, and if you're healthy and your body's healthy, then your mind is more healthy.
And you got the endorphins going. And
yeah.
It really is interesting too, from my perspective as a lawyer. I have a lot of people in your position that come to me and they say, well, I'm afraid to get a therapist or a counselor or on antidepressants or, medication for my bipolar because I'm going to lose my kids because they're going to think I'm crazy. No, it's the exact opposite. If you're the person who's getting help for yourself, that's the person where a judge is going to look, or a child's representative, or a guardian ad litem, or a custody evaluator, and look and say, you are doing the right kind of self-help in that respect. You're getting professional help. Sometimes medications can help, but you're not trying to do it on your own without any help, because that usually is going to be a bad recipe,
Terrible recipe. But I do though think I thought that I could do it all on my own. Oh, I don't, I have these great lawyers, but the rest of it, I'll just figure it out as I go. And that wasn't healthy, because you need, it's a very, you don't want to feel any more vulnerable than you already do, because you already feel terribly vulnerable by asking for help. But we have to ask for help because it's there and it's very important.
Tell me this. This is interesting to me from what you said. So when you're going through this, your friends kind of get sick of it, your family gets sick of it. How do you feel, prior to your divorce, you have friends, you have a group that maybe even you and your husband hang out with and that kind of thing, but you have your group of friends. Maybe some of your friends haven't gone through a divorce and they're happily married and they've got kids, and all of a sudden now you're the one going through. How is it awkward then? Do you lose friends?
Yes.
And people dissociate themselves?
Yes. It's awkward because people don't, when you're invited to a party and you're married, you're going with your partner, and all of a sudden you're the single girl, and it makes it a little more just difficult for people to, and also you're constantly talking about your stupid divorce, which is no fun for a party conversation. So, but yes, I did lose. He and I didn't share a lot of friends together, but a lot of my friends were they were overwhelmed, and also people don't know what to say when they haven't experienced it, when they are happily married, which many people are. They don't know how to even deal with you in that situation. And that's why it's very important to get outside objective help, because your friends they'll be mad with you and they'll be sad with you, but that's not really that helpful for your relationship with them. And it's not their responsibility to, uphold you, nor is it your family's. Of course, the support is very important, but you can't inundate them with your problems. You have to figure it out with the help of other people.
Well, it's really, I think, an enlightened position for people listening and viewing, because it's just another layer of a divorce, right? You can look at a divorce case and you can say there's child support laws and maintenance, property division, and all that kind of stuff. Most people don't know anything about how to manage just my friends and my family and dealing with them and how they might be viewing me going through this process. And really in that process don't even have the ability to see themselves as others around them are seeing them in that position.
Oh, no. Yes, I completely agree with you. Yes. So it is, yeah, there's so many different layers of the experience. And also, unfortunately, I think that oftentimes women or maybe, or people in general, maybe think of it as shameful. And it's not. It's it's a dissolution of a relationship, just as you may formerly have had a boyfriend that didn't work out, or a girlfriend, or whatever it is. Yes, you were married. Yes, you had children, but it's just simply, it just didn't work out. Unfortunately, I was married very young, and who I was then and what I was interested in then, it was very different than, 10 years later when the divorce started, or what I was willing to put up with, or whatever it was. So, but it's not a shameful thing, and it shouldn't be looked at. And I think that, when women say, "Oh, I'm divorced," it's, it's kind of, it still has a bit of a stigma, which I think is lessening now. But still, it's not a shameful thing.
Well, listen, these are very, very helpful,
Good.
comments, thoughts. I think anyone, watching and listening, I guarantee there's plenty of people that really can relate to what you've gone through, because maybe they're living it right now at various different stages. I think at some point we'll have you back and even talk about, because you mentioned some things about relationships and so on and so forth, and change, in talking about that, because people ask me oftentimes, what's the leading cause of divorce? Why do people get divorced? But it's so complicated, because you mentioned when you're a young woman, how you view the world and what your dreams and aspirations are versus, 10, 15, 20 years later. We all evolve, we all change.
Mm-hmm.
And then how does that affect our relationships
Mm-hmm.
and our marriages? And so that would be a really interesting conversation. But
yes,
I really, really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you,
I think it was
James.
super helpful.
This was very fun. I loved it.
Yes. And so if anyone
I hope it
has,
was helpful.
contact me at www.beermannlaw.com. I'm James Quigley, and thanks for joining.
And James is wonderful.